thank you so much for joining us today. Again, as I've said, it is my first roundtable as a professional, and it is the first roundtable that we're having here with Unlimit'ed as well. So it's so exciting. I'm so honored to have each of you here with us today. As you all know, majority of you have been a participant in our Female Voices series, and then we have Tatiana, who offers incredible experience and so much input around women, and she's a great example of why we do the things that we're doing today. And this is essentially a continuation of that series, and it's just about the fact that we would like to bring together so many voices and experiences in collaboration to really showcase the amazing people that you are and how people have the opportunity to create serious change within the STEM industry. And I'm not going to bother talking for too much longer. I would just like you guys to introduce yourselves. So Tatiana, could you start us off with a little introduction, please?
Yes, sure. Hello, guys. I'm happy to be here. This is also first roundtable for me, as well as for you, Sim. Speaking about me, I'm Tatiana Meloshkan, and I'm working in Unlimit'ed. I'm customer success team lead. This is my position at the moment. I have quite big experience in financial sector, being on several leadership positions. So those topics that we will discuss today are very interesting, and I have experienced all of situations that that women can face on every topic. So I have experience, and I can share it, and I will be happy to hear you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We can't wait to hear about it. And Agata, please join us in the conversation and introduction about yourself.
Sure. My name is Agata. I'm based in London, and for the past 8 years, really, I've been part of the venture ecosystem. So first, as a startup founder, twice. Actually, my first startup in Hong Kong, I managed to sell, and I've been an angel investor since then. And yeah, my second startup has been in the very technical area, capital markets infrastructure products, selling to investment banks. And most recently, I moved to the other side as an investor, venture capital investor. I've been mainly focusing on fintech, but as part of all of these experiences, I've been advising and mentoring entrepreneurs from everywhere, pretty much in the world, because I've been part of Techstars and other global accelerators. And as a consequence of these experiences, I recently set up this platform called Female Foundry that has got the mission to bring more female entrepreneurs and investors into the startup ecosystem. So I'm very passionate about helping women, not even women, actually girls. You know, sometimes I have a chat with a 14-year-old who has got no idea where she is in her life. That was 2 weeks ago. Actually, I had a chat, and that's fine. So I'm here to have a great discussion with this incredible woman.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to have you here with us as well. So Charlotte, would you like to kick us off as well?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Charlotte Day. I am one of the 2 directors of ContentWorks Agency, which is a woman-led marketing agency for the financial services space. Myself and my awesome business partner, Nikki, we have had ContentWorks Agency for 7 years now. Having worked in the finance space for a very long time, as women in the finance space, we have some stories. And we also gleaned a huge amount of experience about the finance sector, how it works. And we really started the agency to have a lot more fun and to push some boundaries. My place in this, I'm coming from a place where I'm so excited about women smashing glass ceilings, especially in the finance space. The Forbes 500, we're watching it all the time. Every time another woman joins, we're so excited by that. When I'm not doing the financial marketing stuff, I am usually on TikTok, doing kind of marketing, social media stuff, anything to do with reading and writing, I'm there. So that's me.
Amazing. A woman of my own heart, marketing. I'm right there with you. Thank you so much. And of course, last but absolutely not least, Selena, a little introduction about yourself.
Thank you very much, Tim, for allowing me to be part of this really amazing, groundbreaking roundtable. So my name is Selena Rowell. I am by profession a scientist, a biochemist, I work for a global pharmaceutical company. I've been in this field for now about 12, 13 years. And I'm very passionate about all things STEM, having been a STEM ambassador for my previous line of work at my previous employer. And I think chemistry as a whole, science as a whole, I think I'm astounded by some of the figures, and just having had that previous interview with him, I'm astounded by the figures with, just how many women who wanted to pursue a career in science, technology, engineering, and a number of them that actually then translate that into a career beyond education. And that's something that I feel very passionately about. I think it's something that women can exceptionally shine at. And I think the energy that I'm hearing from all the speakers around in this call today is a testament to that. So I'm very, very keen to see how we can really make an impactful change and get more females making a real impact in that science and technology sector.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. That actually brings us on really nicely, just where I would like to give a little bit of context, because as we've already touched on the fact that you all have such incredible experience, but why is it that we have come together today and brought back together previous interviewees? And I just would like to give a little bit about that, just to give context to all of our viewers. And so essentially, as this is our first roundtable for our Unlimited Access Female Voices series, it's important to understand how we got to this point. And whilst I know that each of us could talk about the multitude of conversations and topics that impact the number of women that we see in STEM, I'd like to start us off with a little short briefing of why I believe that this conversation is so important. And of course, we will elaborate on that further throughout the roundtable itself. According to recent UCAS data provided by the HESA, 35% of STEM students in higher education in the UK alone are women. And that only has a growth of 1,000 women, like female students, year on year. But if we take a general outlook at the female STEM workforce, in 2019, it sat at 24%. And WISE, which is Women into Science and Engineering, showed that by June of 2022, the workforce sat at 26.9%. So yes, we are seeing growth. However, I'm sure we can all agree that we would like to see it at a faster pace. There continues to be this unconscious bias that needs to be tackled in efforts to create an inclusive workforce through conscious inclusion. And additionally, women have absorbed stereotypes which deter them from the industry, such as STEM subjects not being appropriate for women, domestic responsibilities, and even the fact that STEM fields may lack support structures and the lack of career mobility. So people operating within and around STEM, much like each of yourselves, have now begun to create numerous methods to raise awareness of the many roles which are available in each relative field, with female communities, mentorship programs, training opportunities, and so on. And whilst we've seen a growth in the number of women within our industries, it would be a dream to see a sizable increase in statistics to tackle systematic issues which are limiting women entering roles of senior leadership. A study in 2019 showed us that only 3% of women make up the CEO population, which shows a greater need to alter mindsets in both genders to enhance collaboration and create clear growth corridors for women to progress upwardly. One of the main driving forces for my passion in starting this series of Female Voices, with the amazing backing of Unlimit'ed, is to uplift women and showcase the diversity that is available within STEM. And it's not all just mathematics, coding, or science, but it actually requires a range of skills and caters to so many different interests. The field not only needs more women, but I believe that it truly deserves to have more women, and those of other characteristics which would be protected to bring different cognitive abilities, approaches to work, and opinions into the space. And with that today, we are joined by women from within the organization like Tatiana and our incredible guests of Charlotte, Selena, and Agata. And they have gifted their time to me previously to offer insight and experience that is relatable not only to women and girls already in similar fields, but also to inspire others to recognize the vastness in opportunity to connect with like-minded people. And I am so beyond privileged to bring these empowering women together today. Our guests are living proof that you can be more than just the stamp of woman, and how female experience and existence draws additional skills in patience, perspective, leadership, decision-making abilities, and creativity. And with that, I welcome you all to our roundtable on creating opportunity and space in the female community. I'm so excited, so thank you guys so much, and let's get straight into it. So where our main headline will be around space and opportunity and creating opportunity, I'd like to bring us on to our first discussion point, which is particularly about the fact of how it is that women can take the approach of being self-made. So that would be leveraging other women to build a sense of wellness, skills, and the idea of creating your opportunity. So maybe Agata, maybe you could start us off with your experience, and what are your thoughts on the social constraints that have made women feel that they need to be self-made, and that's led to us having those micro communities within and around STEM.
One thing that I want to mention is that there's nothing shameful, actually, if anything. It's quite positive. There's a positive notion behind being self-made. I am actually self-made. I'm the best example of that. And it's, you know, you can measure success in different ways. Whether I'm successful or not successful, it's a secondary almost topic. But creating opportunities in your life, I would say it should be seen as a virtue, not necessarily a constraint. So that's what I want to say, because many opportunities that are there for everyone else are not maybe the best opportunities, and the best opportunities for you, and you know yourself the best, will be those that you created for yourself. So that I want to say that out loud. And then in terms of support, you know, also in my opinion, it's a proactive, and it should be like this action. You know, I think that first of all, it's about creating people around you, and whether this is, you know, 3 people around you, whether these are your friends or maybe your friends of friends initially, but it's really creating this circle of people around you that align with your values. So maybe it starts with recognizing what are your values, or what is important for you as an individual, and therefore who within your circle. And very often we grow these organically, these friendship circles, and we don't think about it, but who are the people who really align with you on the value perspective? You know, who are those people who value the same topics? And I'm thinking, you know, even for younger girls, you can be thinking, who are the people who you can trust or count on or share your interests? And then really that becomes your early adopter, let's say, community. So now it's about creating people, and by the way, this doesn't need to be homogeneous, yeah? It's about bringing also diversity, but that's why I'm talking about the values. You can be bringing people from different cultures. I would almost encourage diversity, but really making sure that your values, understanding your values early on, and really nurturing that small community early on. No one has ever built a big support network, you know, starting from 100 people. It always starts with these people who are aligned along certain vision or values, I would say. So maybe it sounds a little bit abstract, but I would say start with your own little community. Every one of us has got a little community around them. We don't recognize that. So really nurture those communities, you know, prioritize the communities before you start seeking support and advice from someone else.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said about the benefits of building a community, both in terms of skill set and even cognitively, and the way that we may think and develop our thought processes. And sometimes you just need that emotional boost as well. So I think it's so valuable. Does anyone want to touch on sort of the value of building a community?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, jumping exactly what Agata said about there's no definition of self-made as such. Anybody can be self-made. I think I would add to it that the reason that I like a lot of communities more on the kind of TikTok and social media spaces is I love celebrating the success of other people, men and women. I love seeing people who are self-made and successful. I like to hear about it. I want to hear the story. You know, they started from nothing and they made this amazing thing. How did you make it? I want to know the stories. And this kind of energy bounces us off each other. I follow, for example, on LinkedIn, Sarah Blakely, who is the founder of Spanx, the underwear, the tights. And she's just so awesome because she started with nothing. She had no investment. And now she's running a $150 million company. And this kind of stuff just really, I find it so inspiring. And I think rather than always trying to be competitive and trying to say, okay, but I didn't do that, she did that, and I should have done that. We can just take some time and say, that's just really awesome. Really, just that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. But I think a lot of the time there is an apprehension as well around the idea of how can girls and women create these opportunities for themselves and connect with the right people. And that is where a lot of people are still struggling.
I agree. And I think one of the great things about following these people who have made themselves is you often see them passing the ladder down to other women. You know, they're supporting charities and education for women and this sort of thing. And, you know, this is a really awesome thing to do. You've made it. Now show other women how you did it, how to get there, you know, help them to rise up also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tatiana, even you, for instance, where you are working within a team dynamic and you're uplifting other people, how do you feel that that benefit and that ethos of having a community is fundamental to success together, both as a team and as individuals?
You know, it is very important because I remember my way of self-made woman. So I started alone. I saw only my mother's experience, and I had my internal values. I had challenges in life, and I created this way by myself. And of course, in that time, if I could have this community, people who would be around me, who could support me and give more advice and experience, it will help me a lot. But I created this way by myself, and this is extremely important to share this experience and to show to girls who are doubting, who don't feel strong, who feel weak, or face some challenges, to show them that everything is possible and you're not alone. And there are examples that you can take, and there are people that you can communicate and contact who can support you. So this is extremely important. And I have also 2 daughters who are growing now, and I'm sharing my experience and I'm showing how to do this. And it is important also for them to be in such a community. But now it is much easier than it was 20, 15 years before. And definitely we should go and develop this.
For sure, I completely agree. And I think even where you touched on the fact that you have daughters now as well, I think that just instantly made me think of the fact that I feel as though it's also really important for people to remember that we need to be nurturing girls and women at all stages of their career, and building that sense of community and uplifting people, not only at the start so that they can find their feet, but also consistently so that women are able to reach senior leadership roles and develop further, or be able to even sidestep within the industry if they so choose to. And I think that's really important. But does anyone have any thoughts on how it is that we have built these mini communities, shall we say, which can even be on a very large scale, in all honesty? But how do we then dissipate those into and integrate them into STEM as a whole? How do we then implement that ethos, that mindset, and bring it into a working world?
There's no clear answer, unfortunately. We are only can be trying our best right now. And one of the things that just jumped to my mind right now is the importance of role models. But what I mean by role models are not necessarily role models. For me, role models that really helped me in my career, and the fact that I've never been scared because I've been pushed through kind of technological and technical education and so on, has been because I've seen people around me when I was very young who were just ordinary people, by the way. What I mean by role model, this is why I want to make it clear, is not necessarily someone who is on the front cover of a magazine. I would say role models that are very familiar to us, or that are ordinary, let's say, that we see, kind of have the opportunity to meet in person and actually be surrounded by. I would say those role models are even more powerful and more important, especially when it comes to the early stages of our career, our life development. And really, and this is why maybe, you know, it is important to recognize maybe that the role, obviously, of parents and people that kind of shaping that context on that or that environment of young girls, to introduce people in that environment, because you've just mentioned cross-generational, for example, education. How you know, for example, my granddad is a physicist. The fact that I had such a great relationship with my granddad, he's been my role model because of his the way he approached problems. So I would say, just to summarize, in my opinion, role models are very important to be pushing certain topics into our life, and those role models need to come from our safe environment. And therefore, the role of pushing or kind of introducing people into our safe environment of certain type is very important. Yeah. I think that, you know, our family and our again, I'm coming back to the same theme, but it's a very important environment. And I think that your parents' openness will add to your, you know, who you're going to become in the future, what risks are going to be able to take, and whether the technology and kind of all scary topics, if STEM is not scary in your family, you're probably not going to be scared or deterred by going into STEM. It will feel very natural. So definitely introducing these topics early on is important, but in the safe environment.
Absolutely. I highly agree with everything that you're saying, but it bids a question in my mind, and it's something that Selena and I had discussed on our interview initially, particularly in people of color, for instance, where women of color are not maybe nurtured as much as they could be when it comes to these fields, because there are certain cultural and societal expectations and a certain sphere that we fall into. And so there are lots of women of color and girls of color who would not necessarily be encouraged to experience STEM subjects and pursue certain conversations and topics. And Selena Selena's living proof of the fact that you can have a very successful woman of color, ethnic minority, although I don't like saying ethnic minority anymore. But I think it's so fundamental, and I think it will be a generational change. But maybe Selena, maybe you can add into that.
Yeah, there were a few things in the community space that I was going to really touch upon, because again, it's something that I've been doing for probably about 15 years. I'm very involved in community work and voluntary work. And I think when someone says the word community to me in this context of women, I think it's something it's grassroots. It's at the very, very basic, fundamental level. You're reaching out to people on a very, very, very open, honest, very at the lowest level you can. You're going in, and it's raw, honest human, relationships that people have. It's a safe space. It's where people talk to each other, forge, lifelong relationships, irrespective of their background, their creed, their color, their faith. And it's at this point where I think where women or young girls are entering life-changing decisions, when they're making these sort of really life-changing decisions in their life, they need that safety net. They need people around them, and that's what community provides them. It provides a huge opportunity for networking. They look at, and role models was something I was absolutely going to reach out and mention something about, that they have that opportunity to reach out to people in a much more informal manner. And that almost helps women, girls, build up that confidence, being, self-esteem, some of these things, going out to become self-made, to go out and do this takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of energy. You have to be in the right frame of mind. You have to have that, everything almost has to be aligned. But for you to take those initial steps takes a lot of guts. And Agata, hats off to you for, achieving everything you have, and to all the women in the school. But you had something, that spark, something that set you off. And so in the communities, I think it's really vital that we, encourage, and, there are events such as workshops and fairs that I've organized within the community to really connect women all men, but women mainly, who we know are successful with those, young girls, women who are, at a crossroads in their life and are trying to understand how they go from here. So it's almost taking that role model and maybe taking that one step further and taking that into like a mentorship sort of relationship, which can then lead to a lot of different things, and it can open up a whole world of options to them. It's often, sometimes, even if you say you want to go in a particular direction and then it doesn't work out, by having a conversation with somebody, you might almost say, oh, well, actually, that's not where I want to go. It's not where I want to be. And that is equally valuable information. It's almost knowing where you maybe want to go and knowing not to pursue that is equally powerful. And I think those personal relationships then carry forward through the rest of your life. It's not something that you just build in the moment and it then it disappears. It's a lifelong connection that you have, and then that carries them through all stages of their career, and impacts them in multiple facets of their life. So I really do appreciate the impact of the communities, big or small.
That was very eloquently said. And I agree wholeheartedly. And I think you make a really good point that sometimes the win is also learning what it is you don't want and what you don't enjoy. That is in itself a massive win. And I think sometimes we can perceive that as a failure because we feel as though we need to achieve certain things by a certain age. And then there are, other urges and priorities that are going to appear to us, whether it's motherhood or looking after family members or adhering to other aspirations that we have, and we need to all do it before a certain age because for some reason we have that perception. But I think there is so much to be said in the strength of bouncing back from learning that maybe something isn't what you actually expected it to be, or it didn't pan out the way you wanted it to, and that realignment of your mindset is so fundamental to growth, and it's so pivotal to building that career for yourself, because there are always going to be setbacks. However, that brings us on perfectly to our second discussion point, which I'm sure everyone will be able to contribute massively to, because it's something we live with. And it is about imposter syndrome and overcoming that, because I mean, everyone in this roundtable so far has been like, not to negate men or men and women, and we are not negating male experience in the slightest. It is just that this series is about female voices, and I'm sure there are so many men and boys that are living with it. But I feel like, particularly around STEM, there is so much discouragement that we are still fighting against. When it comes from a female perspective, that I would really like to get each of your takes on. How do you personally define imposter syndrome and your experiences, and will lead on to how we can actually start to combat that and actually start to uplift girls even from a very young age.
Actually, this is really funny, because when I first read your question, I had to Google, what is the definition of imposter syndrome?
Me too.
Really. And the first thing that came up was the whole feeling that you weren't good enough to be there. And I thought, yeah, no, that doesn't apply to me. I feel like I'm good enough to be here. But then the next thing that I read was feeling like you have to prove yourself, working crazy hard, killing yourself to hit deadlines, to be better than everybody else. You're not getting the recognition you need, so you try harder and you work yourself into the ground. And apparently that is also imposter syndrome. And I'm like, so maybe I have been there. Certainly I have been there in the finance space, where I feel like I have to be a superwoman, and I am a superwoman. But because I'm not getting that kind of tick and the star, everyone's just like, oh yeah, she's there in the corner doing her content stuff. I'm striving harder and harder. And at some point you say, okay, I need some kind of balance, some kind of mental health balance, because this is too much stuff. And I think that's a really interesting point, that imposter syndrome looks different for everyone. And I didn't know that.
Absolutely. And I think it's also where you were saying like, oh, I don't have that.
Right.
I feel like on the flip side of it, there can very much be the state that you don't have to live in a state of imposter syndrome constantly. It can flare up in moments. It could be a particular task, or just a certain, something may happen and you just go through a wave of it. It doesn't mean that we are all going to live in a state of fear or a lack of seeking validation.
Right.
It just means that it can emerge. Like, I have days where I wake up and I'm like, got this, don't even have to worry about it, like in my sleep. And then there are other days where I feel like I'll be rocking in a corner somewhere, and it's not that necessarily someone has even done or said anything. But it's also my own perception of myself, and it's so important to alter that.
And you don't know also what other people are going through. I mean, I've had situations where I'm about to go out on stage for like a big presentation, and I'm looking at everyone else. I'm thinking, oh my God, they're so impressive. The people I'm on the stage with are so impressive. But then they're telling me afterwards that they were thinking the same thing, like, oh my God, I'm on the stage with her and she's really impressive and I'm not going to know anything. So we're all thinking the same thing. Everyone's thinking it.
Yeah, I've seen that happen so many times. And it was just so interesting because when we were preparing for our roundtable and we were discussing the topics, and most of our guests here today instantly were like, when the imposter syndrome one came up, they're like, yeah, I've got ample to say. Because it's such a prolific thing, and of course it's not isolated to STEM, but I think it is something that we so heavily feel and we internalize it. And exactly like what Charlie just said, it's not something that we necessarily would vocalize and share with people, but everyone's experience is so relative, and more often than not people are going through it at the exact same time, just from a different angle and in a different body. Yeah. And it's so important that we find the ways to cope and to challenge that mindset, because everyone has the right to have an opinion and be present in the room. And that's something that actually was in my interview with Charlotte, where we spoke about people having the right to be in the room. Like, you have the right to have that voice. Don't be your own imposter before anyone else has even said anything, because people are probably very grateful that you're there, but we just have this perception. But it'd be amazing if you guys could maybe explain or share any experiences that you've had around where you felt it and how you deal with it.
Thank you for this topic, because also I'm Googling and I know a lot about that, and I remembered a lot of things about myself. I remember when I started my career in financial sector, I was 25 years old, and I started to work in banking, like customer service specialist. I was working hard, and in 1 year, I was promoted to a manager of a branch. And in 6 months, I became a director of 2 branches. So I was 26 years old, and my experience in banking was 1.5 years, and I'm a director. So yes, I had this syndrome, and I started to work very hard. So I should prove that I deserve it, that I can be here. I was working around 13 hours per day, sometimes 6 days per week. And when I was close to burnout, I started to think something is wrong, girl, something is wrong with you. So what is first? I don't deserve it. So why you don't deserve it? Why? Because others are better than you. But if you are here, it doesn't matter if it is good luck, if it is your hard work, you are here. So take the chance and to work. The second, fears inside me, because I don't feel very professional, competitive, and so on. So what are my fears? First of all, I understood that I don't know how to communicate with different type of people. So what should you do? Go and learn about the people. What are the types? How to communicate with them. Next one, I don't know some things about my about some financial instruments. So go and learn. I started to learn hard. I started to develop my leadership skills. I started to learn how to delegate things, how to create effective teams, and became much easier. And the third very important thing, it's about people who are around you, because definitely there will always be people who are criticizing, toxic people, who will always say that she don't deserve, she's too young, or she's too old, she's too blonde, she's too. You will never be too good for everyone. So you should understand yourself and don't listen to people. to everyone. So you should filter out your community, people who are around you, to focus on those who supports you, who believes in you. So that was my experience. And once again, what I can tell, it is important to believe in yourself. So if you're here, you deserve it. What you should do, you should learn more, develop your skills, develop your knowledge, and very important to choose people around you, your community, the right persons. So yeah, this is my experience.
I completely agree, and I think where you said it so lovely, in such a lovely way, sorry, that where you said, if you're here, it's because you already deserve to. And I think that's so important. That's something that, like, I personally experience, and I'm very fortunate that I'm surrounded by an incredible team, because my boss, she's always reminding me, like Nadia, she is constantly like, but you already have the skills. So sometimes you can just turn around, you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, why am I here? How have I even gotten to this point? I don't deserve this. And you're right. Sometimes you have to take that moment of reflection and go look back at it and be like, well, no, actually, what is it that I actually don't have that deters me from being here? Or is it just a feeling? Because probably through your experience, through your credentials, through all of the proof in your work, you can actually prove to yourself tenfold why you do deserve to be here and why no one else could do it the way you would. And I think that's so important to sometimes just reflect and check yourself and realign your emotions, because imposter syndrome, whilst we can be influenced heavily by those around us and expectations within society, I think a lot of the times it's things that we've digested, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, and it just hinders us. But it'd be really interesting. I think, Agata, especially running the Female Foundry, it would be really interesting to know, like, you must come across this quite often with people.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you must experience it yourself, and people must be like, but how? Like, how is that the case?
Yeah, so one thing that I want to say is, one way that helps me personally, and also, I guess, others, how to deal with imposter syndrome, is to first of all recognize it in the first place. So I'm surprised that you haven't Googled it yet. I actually had my aha big moment a few years ago, but that aha moment that there is actually such thing as an imposter syndrome helped me to understand my life up to that point. Meaning that the fact that I would be compensating, and coming back to your Charlie point, compensating, when you look at my career, partially people say, oh, you've been so ambitious. Actually, some of the projects and some part of my career, why I've achieved so much is because I thought that I had to achieve so much to fit in. So it's quite interesting when you look back, especially for me, I definitely recognize some great almost streaks in my career where I would be only motivated because what was driving me rather was the idea of fitting in. So first, definitely once you recognize it, so it's good to know what is, even having that experience of Googling it, and really recognize you in that moment when you're having when you have a, let's say, that flare of an imposter syndrome, to recognize it, and I think that the point of that recognition is to understand that not necessarily we are all different, and therefore you will always be missing. We're all imperfect until we pretty much die. So I'm not a perfect leader, and I'm not a perfect specialist in X and Y. I can be spending hundreds of hours and years, creating a specialization experience, but I'm still not going to be perfect. So I think that embracing the fact that we are not perfect is the second step. And thirdly, to recognize that we are all unique, and therefore we are able to create, to deliver a very unique value. And each one of us, because we all come from very different contexts. We would have unsupporting parents. Some of them, my parents were not actually supportive for most of my career. Actually, I somehow found a way through, I've found support within myself, which is, you know, there's another maybe more philosophical topic, but how do you find, if you don't have any allies for your ideas in your life, how do you find an ally within yourself, and how do you keep going? Because as we touched upon, you know, there will be female or women or girls in this community that will be struggling with that. Actually, you know, it's great if you have one friend, but maybe you don't have any friend at all. And what do you do then? So that's another topic. But then, you know, recognizing that you are very unique and there is a value that you will be able, therefore, as a default, each of us can contribute to any topic, to be honest. It's only recognizing that some of them will have that courage, will have that confidence to speak out, and some won't. And therefore, recognizing that you are unique and you are going to be able to bring value, almost tames that imposter syndrome down. And that's default. You don't need to believe it. This is fact. This is a fact. Anyone, it's only the matter of willingness. You know, taming that. So then you can maybe whatever project you need to engage with or in, you know, you can plunge into it. But I think that these 3 steps, recognizing, then, you know, really making sure that you identify these aspects of being unique and value are important. And then thirdly, you know, plunging into that situation. I feel that this is the only way to overcome it. Maybe it's a little bit of a lengthy answer, but yeah, I found it very helpful.
Yeah, no, it's not lengthy at all. No, it was very insightful. And I think you made some really good points, especially about, I think, the recognition, and also the part about where there are some women that won't necessarily have what they perceive to be an ally. And I think that can become quite a cyclic journey when we look at it objectively, because if a woman feels as though they don't deserve to be in the space, or they don't have the confidence, they may not seek a community, because that would require them to speak up. When they don't have a community, they don't have someone to uplift them. And if they don't have a family that's on their side, then who do they turn to? And so it's really important that we find and share tools in which it's not necessarily just purely community driven. We can have a community where we don't actively meet up and discuss things, as long as you know that there is a presence, whether it's something that's online and you aren't required to share your face, or whether it's just by having content that is available online that people can look at, and they may not have the passion or the confidence to appear with, like front facing, but they may still want to have the messaging. And I think it's so important that we offer these different tools, catering to different mindsets and personalities, to help challenge imposter syndrome. Because throwing yourself into the deep end may work for some people. It works for me, but I also know for other people it probably really won't. It could be something that's really damaging to their confidence. So how do we systematically tackle the development of imposter syndrome?
It's interesting that you mentioned it. Just I'll touch upon, because I don't want to take too much space, but actually with Female Foundry, I recognize that to be an issue as well. I'm actually, and funny enough, I've recognized myself as an introvert. I only, by jumping, I become an extrovert, but my safe space, really, if I were to choose between the two, I'm an introvert. So partially what I've been doing with Female Foundry, I've been actually focusing on creating content, because I knew that there would be people who wouldn't necessarily want to turn up to the events, wouldn't want to socialize, but would still, by providing them content, I would be able to, you know, build that support for them. So I recognized it early on with Female Foundry, actually, and recently I've been pushing for that, to exactly bring these women as well, who are, let's say, not like me sometimes, introverts, and don't necessarily want to speak out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Charlotte, I'm sure you'll back me on this one, like the importance of content.
Right. Oh my goodness, the importance of content. And actually, because we're approaching International Women's Month, and as a marketing agency, especially a woman-led marketing agency, we love to kind of dig into like the women in the sector that we're working in, finance, who have just blown this glass ceiling apart. And, you know, some of these stories are so interesting. And I would say part of tackling the imposter syndrome is looking to history to see how women in history tackled it, because this is not the first. We're not the first ones to come across this. There were women who came before us, like, for example, Victoria Woodhull, who's like 1810, 1820, and she was the first stockbroker on Wall Street. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what that was like? And then really disturbingly, the first Black woman on Wall Street was not there till 2018. That was 2018. And she was the youngest Black stockbroker on Wall Street. And again, I can only imagine, you know, because these prejudices and these kind of stereotypes are still very much there, especially in such a male dominated, we say in the industry, pale, male and stale for the Wall Street New York Stock Exchange. I can only imagine what these women went through. So I love to read these stories, to look at the history and to say, you know, we're not the first ones to come across this. How did they tackle it? How confident were they to go where they went?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but that statistic that you just said, 2018,
yeah,
is so shocking.
Yeah,
like
Lauren Simmons, her name is. 2018.
Yeah, that is phenomenal. And this is why it's so important that not only on a personal level do we tackle it, but systematically to create space for these women, because 2018, that's just, it shouldn't be the case.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy? And you know, women have money, we have bank accounts, we have spending power, but yet it's taking so long for that to filter through to senior positions and influential positions. And we have to speed it up a bit. It's
absolutely time. Absolutely. Selena, how about you? Like, what are your thoughts?
So there was two things I was going to say here. That first of all, I think we're doing a great job here by building that community for women. We're supporting Sim's activities and helping her build her own community and following to really support women and just trying to, and young girls. And I hope you're providing the tools and media to do that. And I think that's absolutely amazing. And I feel, again, it's amazing that we're a part of this. To go back to the imposter syndrome, I mean, come on. I mean, being in science, I walk into rooms with people and I look around and I think I'm probably the most stupid person in the room. There are people that are just so bright. They're such beautiful, brilliant, bright minds in science. And I probably, there's been many a time where I felt that way. So I think it's very hard not to feel that way. But I think all the symptoms you talked about, I resonated with when you described, I think when Charlie was describing, when she did the Google, I knew what it was, but when she described step-by-step sort of phases you go through as you're experiencing imposter syndrome, I would be lying if I said I could not associate with at least 3/4 of those that you listed off there. And I think that it's something that I've had a conversation with a few people, and sometimes what's really, really profound is knowing that you are not the only one. To know that actually there are so many people going through what you're feeling, and it then realize it's not such a stigma, or it's not such that you self-inflict, and you're not thinking, oh well, actually I'm not the only one, everyone goes through this. And you then realize it's a very psychologically driven, it's a state of mind, right? It's your psychology that's effectively driving this. No one's calling you an imposter. No one's telling you to work extra hours and kill yourself. And no one's saying that you're not deserving of being there. There's no one shooting you down. There's none of that's happening there. It's a story that we almost tell ourselves. And in this psychological story that we built up in our minds. And I find that a really great way to combat it. And I think because I think so Agata and Sim were talking about that previously, about communities, speaking to people, having these tools to help people do that. And I think when you don't have people that you can reach out to, for those people that don't have something, these sort of tools are really, us having this conversation is really, really helpful. I feel that also sometimes just because it's something self-inflicted, sometimes just taking a step back from the situation and looking and thinking, well, okay, what have I achieved? Take the emotional aspect out of the equation completely and look at the plain facts, black and white, and ask yourself, what have I achieved? And you can structure each situation and scenario in a star format. So you look at the situation, the task, the action that you took, and the result, and then the result will speak volumes. And that would be the hugest self-affirmation that someone can give themselves, because it was brought on by their own self-thinking. Because people can tell you things, people can prop you up, and they can tell you you're amazing till the cows come home. But until you really believe it, the impact it's going to have is truly limiting. And sometimes the result that you get isn't necessarily the result you wanted, but you may think, well, actually, okay, maybe I went, the action that I deployed in that particular scenario wasn't quite right. But for next time, I've learned what to do, or I know that this probably wasn't the best way, and you can refine it. And it's a cyclical thing. And unfortunately, like with most things, it's a psychological battle that we're fighting. And often we are the ones that we are the cause, the effect, but we are also the remedy.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something so interesting when you look at this conversation and each of your stories about imposter syndrome and your comments. Not one person has spoken about a world without imposter syndrome, because it's not possible. And it's just so important to recognize the fact that it is very normal to go through that. It doesn't have to be confined to the fact that you are a woman. It may be perceived that it's young women with imposter syndrome, lack of industry experience, or maybe not the right qualification. But similarly, it's also there for older women or people further along down the career chain, because they're looking at the next progressive step in their career and they're like, jeepers, am I really going to be able to do this? It is a lifelong challenge, but as long as we can find the right tools that work for us, I think it's something that we will always battle with, but it will become easier. And that is why something like this, like a tool like this, having this series is so important. It's something that's so, like, it's so heavily close to my heart, because I just feel as though I thrive being around such incredible women like each of you. But then I also know that I feel like having this recording and putting it on the internet, like, I know younger Sim probably would just have crippled up in the corner, wrapped herself in a duvet and hid from this opportunity. And I'm sure that there are people still out there like that. And I think there are ways and means in which we can personally take an approach to tackling imposter syndrome and symptoms and coping with it. But I think there's also a lot to be said about the more systematic side of things from a school age, where we can be teaching, not only encouraging girls and women to be joining in these subjects and pursuing their interests, but also I think there's a massive stance around the fact that education is purely skill set. But I think it's also about learning how to cultivate your mind in a certain way and attune yourself. And I think it's so important, because that can sometimes be negated. And like you said, like, each of your experiences, look at how much each of you have achieved. If we as individuals are still experiencing that, what does that say? That we haven't been encouraged and given the right tools to challenge ourselves mentally, rather than just in terms of our skills.
So there's just one thing to resonate, just to emphasize something that you just said. It made me think of something. And in the context of women, what it just made me realize is that we are also, we all go through this. The point I think that needs to be emphasized here is that because we as women are crippled or are at a slight disadvantage from the get-go, we feel this imposter syndrome and this need to prove oneself, this self-worth. We feel it umpteen times more. We are actually, because of that disadvantage that we're at, we feel the need to prove it. We feel it more keenly as a result of that, which is probably why I think it needs that tenderness, nurturing. It needs a special, not even a section or a chapter, I don't know how to explain it, but it has its own place. And I think themes like this are so important, because, as you said, from a school age, and that's what triggered, I think, some of the things that you were saying to me, it's from a young age, and those are people's formative years. That's a girl's formative years, where, you know, the people that she's around, the situations that she sees, how people get treated, things that are said, that things that are not said, things that are done that are not done, are what then influences that young woman's mindset for the years to come. And it's something that at that sort of stage, because we hear only, you know, we hear about, you know, bullying and all these other different things that, you know, are so prolific at that younger age, where they're the most vulnerable. And I think that is something which could be a tool to safeguard them, educate them a bit better, make them stronger, assertive, and better informed, and help unravel some of that unravel and untangle some of that, the misconceptions, the wrong ideals that they've been subjected to and have unfortunately learned from. That's just something that I wanted to say that I felt quite passionately about, that you'd triggered when you were saying something.
I want to as well a little bit, just a very short one. Add just one sentence really, which is be gentle on yourself. You know, we are women. You know, we don't need to become men to be impressive, to be successful. It's not about repeating the same path that men somehow paved. Let's say that's how the history goes. For us, we don't need to be them to find our strength within us. So be gentle with yourself.
Be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I mean, Selena, what you said, it was so accurate, particularly about the fact that like the perception of being a girl. So from a young age, it's your identity is somewhat written for you. And in literature, I mean, sorry, literature reference, just because I'm an English student, it's they refer to it as strikes. So they say you have strikes against you. So if you're a woman, strike one. If you don't aesthetically fit a man's dynamic of what a woman should look like, strike two. If you're a woman of color, strike three. And it goes on and on and on. And they refer to these strikes. And clearly, as we can see, particularly like we're seeing it in other industries, but in STEM, we're seeing it more emerging now. These strikes are being wiped off because women are like, actually, no, you can take a strike. You can take it back. Keep that. I don't want it because I'm going to slay. And I think it's so, I love it. I absolutely adore it. But I think it would actually be really interesting to know, like on a day where imposter syndrome takes over, perhaps you've been overworking or you're feeling that you're not delivering, what would be your go-to to uplift yourself?
I have a very practical one.
Sure.
Because by the way, I overwork myself on a weekly basis until I run out of steam and I get to the important meeting and I can't really do anything about it. But it doesn't need to be a meeting. If you face some challenge and you need to somehow pick yourself up, first of all is to get out of the house or office or school or anywhere you are and just start breathing. I think that we are still very physical. Our brain chemistry is very physical. It's very connected to how we actually feel, how we physically are. So really breathing deeply really helps me, resets my mind. And really, you know, that's important, one thing. Secondly, that one thing that someone shared to me a few years ago, actually, that's been helping me with imposter syndrome, especially when you're faced, let's say I speak on the panel and I'm not prepared, or I get in, I didn't have a good night's sleep and my mind is somewhere else. What I do is I literally, and someone gave me this tip and it really works for me. So I'm just sharing the practical tips that work for me personally. To stretch your arms and really try to stretch yourself, make a bigger space out of yourself in this universe than you normally occupy. So really make yourself, I'm a big person. I'm not, you know, 1.68 meters. I'm a 2-meter giant. And then try to imagine yourself as a big person. And that's really, I don't know, it sounds funny, but
no, I love it.
For me, it just reshifts my mindset. And the third thing, just quickly, what really helps, and I do it every evening actually, because that's about, you know, building that self-worth and confidence. Every night when I go to sleep, like literally before I fall asleep, it's already dark, I thank myself about, and I count achievements of the day, and I thank myself. Agata, this evening, this meeting didn't work out, but you know what? You've done your best. And I literally, it takes 10 seconds, or, you know, I just run through the day, that particular day, and I literally just recognize the effort and the energy that I've put in, and I count my achievements. And then at some point I fall asleep. But it really helps me to build that confidence and kind of that maybe not confidence, that ground, you know, that foundation, that balance in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add on to that, where you were talking about recognizing achievements for the day, I think sometimes it's also important to realize that sometimes your achievement can just be the fact that you showed up.
Exactly. Completely.
It doesn't have to be something monumental. You don't have to have revolutionized STEM or written something that no one's ever written before. It just has to sometimes be that you've shown up.
Exactly. And that's the whole point, because when you think about it, your day is really made out of multiple interactions, and you just need to recognize what you're happy about, what pushed you a little bit further. That's already an achievement itself. So you reposition your idea of achievement and success in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Let's move on to our third and final discussion point, which is something that it's very interesting to me, which is why I've inserted it in, because I have faith that you'll all be able to add something incredible. There is a lot that I have seen in terms of, and I'm sure you each have as well, about this stereotyping of women. Stereotyping happens across the board, of course it does. However, the perception that a woman won't be able to enter a senior leadership role because she's too emotive, or oh, she's going to go and have a family at some point, so why should we give her the opportunity? And there's this perception that women as nurturers, it's actually quite it has a negative gaze. Personally, from what I've seen around so many women, and even like what earlier Tatiana had mentioned about her children, like there is so much empowerment in being a nurturer, and it brings a whole entire new skill set and way of working into the working world and the professional world. How can we cultivate an environment that better enhances that nurturing side, and how can we encourage women to be their natural nurturing side without having to worry too much about that negative gaze?
I think firstly, just to be really clear from my side, I think that the word nurturing is kind of sometimes misunderstood in the workplace. People see this as a weakness. People see, or if you're a nurturer, you're probably really motherly or you're really maternal. I'm personally not. I never have been, but that doesn't mean that I'm not a nurturing person in the workplace. It doesn't mean that I'm not a nurturing director. I like to listen. I like to empower people. And it could be just something as simple as, just to give a small practical example, if anyone in my team wants to, let's say, take an afternoon off because they're feeling overwhelmed, or, you know, you need to go to the doctor, or you need to go, don't be awful about it as a boss. Just be like, oh, sure. Okay, cool. I hope you're okay. I hope everything's okay. I've worked in companies where the boss will be like, why have you got to go? You have to justify your leave, and just make everyone feel very intimidated and very stressed. And working in marketing, as you know yourself, it's already quite stressful. I mean, just hitting all the deadlines and hitting all of the meetings and the client requests, it's already stressful. Don't make it more stressful. Be nurturing to the needs and the requirements of your team, and listen and be calm. So that's what I would take from it, kind of as on a director level.
I agree with you, and I want to add that it is very important to be in balance, because if you are too nurturing, so you can be really weak, you can be too friendly and not very focused, and not giving the right emotions, experience, and this drive and these feelings in a team. So there should be a balance, but definitely about nurturing women, it is important to listen to your team members. It is important to provide support. It is important to train, to be a mentor, because we are working with people, with humans. It is not instrument or resource. No, they are people. So if you're a leader, you should listen to people. You should find a way, and you should communicate. No go too much in that, but you should be like this. So like a leader, you should have different. Yes, you should be different. You should understand where you should be supportive, where you should be more goal-oriented and ambitious with your team. So it is important to be in balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like Charlotte, the sort of like boss you had described, of the one who's a bit more maybe let's say like micromanaging. I think one thing that I've also like realized over time is I feel as though you'll get multitude of characters, but you get two oppositions that you can often find. You have the very archetypal nurturing boss as a woman who is soft, she builds friendships, a sense of affection, almost takes the mother hen approach. But then what I've also seen is that you get this opposition, and I feel like it is a result of the view of women that you have this boss who takes a more masculine, absorbed energy because she feels like at some point she has had to prove herself and have the brashness and harshness that would be perceived and it comes across as an aggressive front, but it's not really. Once it's broken down, it's actually just the fact that at some point she has been in a room driven and by male energy and maybe hasn't felt heard and has worked incredibly hard to get to the managerial position she is now in. And she doesn't want to ruin that perception by adhering to her female stereotypical discriminations that may come about. Oh, she's just very emotional. Oh, no one listens to her because she's just speaking nonsense. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And then over the years, this facade can be created that you're just going to be firmer. Of course, that's not to say that there aren't still people that are maybe just a bit more micromanagement in their approach. But I think it just shows that experience can also be really essential to the way that someone then absorbs and then projects those in their leadership skills. But I think the idea of a nurturing woman being a negative, it is something that is still highly seen as a negative trait. But I think it can actually bring so much more benefit to a business. And I think we spend so much time at work and so many hours with colleagues that there has to be a more humane side and understanding, much like what Charlie was saying about, okay, if you have an appointment, that's fine. You're human. Like, go ahead. Oh, you're feeling a bit burnt out. I'm so sorry. How can I help? That doesn't mean that everyone, like all women, are going to sit together, holding hands, weeping together. That's not what it's about.
One thing that I want to mention, Sim, as well, because I think that just because it hasn't been mentioned yet, I really think, and I even studied the subject, so it's not something that is coming to me personally, from me personally. Really, the best leaders are nurturing leaders. So there's no doubt about it. The best leaders are those that have got nurturing component. And the reason why I'm saying it, because especially as a young girl, you're let's be honest, you're at the threshold of entering, let's say corporate world. And corporate world and building career in a corporate world is actually quite brutal if you want to get far. And by the way, it's both for men and women, yes, in many contexts. And the consequence of many years spending in the very, let's say, corporate organized environment is that you can lose your sensibility and your vulnerability. And that happens to most of the people who stay in, especially in big organizations that haven't been especially exposed to nurturing bosses for a long time, that haven't had that, let's say, role models, that haven't been protecting their true vulnerable self. And therefore, really the true leaders are those that have managed to balance the career, the ambition, the politics of being in a big corporation, but yet protected their heart, because eventually the best leaders, the most successful leaders, are those that can connect with everyone in their organization. And you can only do that. This cannot be faked. This is about protecting you being a human in the working environment. And therefore, I want to be a little bit careful that we don't talk about you're either nurturing or you're not a nurturing, or, being nurturing is X, it's Y. It's the consequence of both. If anyway, makes you a great leader and makes you a successful person. And therefore, the higher you are actually in the management career, and I've met, many people who are executives, or I've been myself on the boards of the companies, are those that actually can connect with people. And that's what's going to make you successful eventually. So don't lose that. Especially I'm talking about girls and women who are already at the, at the beginning. It's not about putting a mask. It's not about, compromising that side of yourself. It's, if anything, protecting yourself and recognize that this is your treasure, because at the top part of the management part, that's what makes a difference. And that's what you will be rewarded for. As a manager, as a director, as an executive, you're not awarded by, making, doing efficiently an Excel spreadsheet. It's about how well you actually manage people, and management is based on interpersonal connections. So I just wanted to lay it out there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that was incredibly said, and I completely agree. I mean, I personally feel there are so many benefits to having the openness of being able to nurture and be a good leader. You're not only going to increase your retention, you're going to build better teams, you're going to open up spaces so that people can have a non-judgmental space to express their opinions. It's multifaceted, and I really don't see personally the negative side of it, because like you said, like Charlie said, like Tatiana said, like it's not as though it means the dire side of things, that women are just going to be like, oh no, my child, my employee, my baby. Like, no, it's not necessarily that. It's that approach. But I think there are so many fundamentals. But Selena, like, please, what are your experiences with nurturing women within science, and how have you seen that it brings a benefit to business productivity?
I'll answer that question. The first thing I was going to say was something slightly controversial. I was going to say that, we talked about this masculinity and the way, there's this cutthroat environment where people are, questioned and everything has to be justified. Things are like that because that's all the world has known thus far, because everything was created and run by men. We do not know any different because that's how things have been, but it does not mean that it is right. That's the first thing I was going to question, just like, because I question that whole thing. The second thing about the nurturing aspect is I think nurturing is an essential ingredient for a multitude of reasons. Every single person who enters a career, or most people, because some people just want to have a job and then go home, but most people want to develop. For you to develop and grow, because no one wants to be doing the same thing day in, day out. For development, that requires nurturing. For you to go from anywhere you are to the next stage, it has required nurturing of some shape or form. So I completely agree. It's an essential thing. Management, definition, one key definition of a good manager, I would feel, is every manager is going to have a different type. He's going to have a group of people. He or she is going to have a group of people that they have to manage. They're all not going to work in the same way. They don't learn in the same way. You have to be flexible in your management style in order to get the most. So a good manager will be able to manage each of one of them to get the most out of their employee, whilst keeping them productive and engaged and and really happy. They are getting the most out of them, and it's not to the employee's detriment, and it's not impacting them in an adverse manner. They're feeling fulfilled, provided that they're in a happy job, or at least they're okay with it. So nurturing is absolutely essential. I do get called mother goose, mother hen quite a bit, so I do know the negative connotations associated with that. So trying to get productivity in the workplace, I mean, I've got extensive years as a trainer, so I think being a subject matter expert and training people up in things that are technical is critical to my role. So for me to do a good job, I have to effectively get my colleagues trained up to a degree where they should come back to me with minimal questions. If they come back to me and ask a lot of questions, I haven't done my job. That's how I see it. If they've grasped most of it and they come back with a few things, then I know, okay, I've done a good job of that. And then it's seeing them through until they spread their wings and fly. Maybe that is like a motherly thing with the analogy that I've given there. But once they're done, they're done. And I think that given the types of roles there are, and I think it's something that Tatiana said before as well, I work with instruments that are soulless and then don't have a personality, but well, some of them have personalities, even though they're just a piece of equipment. They throw hissy fits all the time. But I think the key thing there is that the people aren't instruments. They are not. They can shout back. They can talk back. They can walk out. They can refuse things. They can do all sorts of things. And they don't obey commands like an instrument would. And they shouldn't be treated like one either. And that is something that I think is a really key thing there to differentiate. That differentiation you made, I think, was really important. But the bottom line, I think, with nurturing in the workplace, I think what I think it does is it doesn't just encourage development and growth, but you're doing it in the most humane, in the most happiest way possible. You are effectively, you are almost making people loyal. You're bringing that human connection. You're creating that human connection to other people. And even, I mean, work in a way, because we spend so much time there, work colleagues become our work family. And it's like a community almost in itself. You lean on each other when times are hard. People will say, oh yeah, you know, this isn't great, that's not great, this is falling apart. And you support each other. And I think that it's not just down to the manager. Sometimes there are tight deadlines. You talked about finance, Charlie, and how you can be really up against it. And sometimes you pull together as a family. And that, again, is a type of nurturing. You all support each other. And teamwork is another example of how the teams and groups function. So I think it's not just down to the manager. I think that it's probably everybody's duty to have even if it's a thin slice of nurturing in a thin sliver of it. It's what makes us human, and I think it plays out in so many ways, and it's absolutely essential for a functioning, happy workplace. Because functioning is, you know, is a very black and white word, but it's not a black and white world.
Yeah, I agree, and it is very important. There are a lot of benefits. If you are listening to people, you build a long-term team. Because if you are opposite leader, so your employees come and going, they go away from you. So you can build this established, stable team. And the second thing, when you are acting with empathy, you're listening to people, you can hear so brilliant ideas. They are open and they are ready to work and they're ready to help. And when you will have a problem and you need to react ASAP, and for example, on Sunday, those people will help, will come and do everything and to support. And but in opposite way, they will tell you, sorry, this is not my working hours. I will come on Monday at 9 and I will help. So you will receive the same from your employees. So if you want to build successful team, definitely you should be more human and person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the crux of all of your contributions in that, it alludes to the same thing, that leadership, like having nurturing in leadership, is so fundamental. And I think in essence, for both genders, it creates the best form of collaboration that we can to uplift productivity. And I think there's a lot to be said around the fact that there is an emotional investment from everyone into their job, whether it's just because they work to live, whether it's because they're passionate about what they do. There is an emotional side which also needs to be nurtured, because like you've all said so rightly, everyone is a human at the end of the day. And I think that nurturing side is fundamental to bring together people of all backgrounds, all experiences, all genders, identifications, to create a cohesive community to work together for the betterment of what we're each doing. And I think what each of you have said is so interesting and it's so poignant. And we're seeing that change coming to life in the fact that you are all leaders and you are all bringing that element of nurturing into work. And it's not just because you're women, it's also just because you are good leaders and you're good at what you do and you understand the benefit. And on that note, that actually brings us to the end of our roundtable. And I am so, so grateful. It has been absolutely phenomenal speaking with each of you and having your experiences and your opinions brought to light. It has been so interesting. I hope you've all enjoyed yourself. And on behalf of myself and Unlimit'ed, I would like to thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. It's just been a very empowering session together. And if nobody has any final thoughts, I bid you all a magical farewell and hope you have an amazing day.
It was really good, Sim. Thank you so much for organising. And I'm
Yeah.
already, because I'm social, I'm already on my phone adding all these wonderful women on LinkedIn, and I'm already there. I'm already on it.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much for organizing it. It's really, you know, thank you for organizing it. Thank you for bringing us all together. It's you're really leading the topic so well, and I hope that there will be more women, even boys, whoever who's going to find it. Because I think that's one thing when you're young, you know, you're confused about everything, including your gender. So let's not include boys either at this stage. So whoever is
Absolutely.
going to
Absolutely.
benefit, and I'm sure there will be people who will find that support. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for your kind words.